Students at Mars Estate Elementary School were visited by Pat Goldys, a retired BCPS principal. Pat Goldys, now an accomplished children's book writer, in an assembly presented to the kids a discussion about becoming an author.
The mama is screaming. She goes, "Eat!" And we heard her. And then the people from SeaWorld said, "Push the dolphin towards her mother." Okay, so 3 years ago, I was principal at Norwood Elementary School. And then I retired and I moved to Florida. And then the pandemic came and I was bored. And I have a granddaughter who likes reading books, and she said, "Grandma, why don't you write a book?" I wrote a book. I wrote one book. This was my first book. And then I wrote a second book, and then a 10th book, and then a 30th book, and then the 35 books I wrote because I loved writing.
Principal Kelly O'Connell, a former teacher for Pat Goldys, invited her to Mars Estates Elementary School last year to meet the kids.
She read many of her books to many of our classes. She inspired one group of third graders to become writers, to become authors. And in that, right on the spot, the students and Ms. Goldys started brainstorming ideas for her latest book.
When my third grade class last year made our own ideas on how to make a book and came to our school today and was teaching us more about how to be an author. And by the way, this was me in the book.
I enjoy reading to children, so I always go to schools and I read the books that I wrote. But then I wrote a book about how children can write their own book inside a book that is published, and I wanted to come to Mars Estates and help them with the book writing process so they will become authors.
The students participated in several games and exercises about creative writing.
Because this is a book for kids to follow 10 steps, and you'll follow each step inside the book. And each step has what it is, a little poem, directions, sample, and this is where you do your part. I call it a bookshop, where the children will work, follow the steps, write inside the book the different parts, and eventually write their own book.
Eleanor Salisbury, a former BCPS kindergarten teacher, read to the kids one of Pat Goldys' books called Signs of Love.
So what Ms. Goldys does is she takes a realistic person and she writes a story around them. So this time she wrote a story about me and signs and being kind.
Students were left with a great impression and insight.
She wrote a lot of books, and that's cool, and I want to start writing books, so she inspired me.
Students are now going to use the book that Ms. Goldys just recently published to write their own pieces of work.